Tonight, the Trump Justice Department now probing the CIA and other intel agencies over their roles in the Russia investigation. A former CIA officer joins us. He's not happy with what's going on. Then a dreamer who's now an advocate for immigrants is here with an inside look at how the U.S. is treating migrants being detained. Also, the quest for peace in the Middle East. Jared Kushner has been working on a plan for years, one that may dismantle the two-state solution. We'll speak with a pro-Israel group to get their take on conditions on the ground and also the Trump administration's approach. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in once again for Richard French. The president is backtracking after a day of being blasted by people on both sides of the aisle after he said this about accepting dirt on opponents from foreign sources.
It's not an interference. They have information. I think I'd take it. If I thought there was something wrong, I'd go maybe to the FBI if I thought there was something wrong. But when somebody comes up with Oppo research, right? They come up with Oppo research. Oh, let's call the FBI. The FBI doesn't have enough agents to take care of it. But you go and talk honestly to congressmen. They all do it. They always have. And that's the way it is. It's called Oppo research.
This morning, the president attempted to do damage control, and he did so on his favorite show, Fox and Friends.
If I don't listen, you're not going to know. Now, if I thought anything was incorrect or badly stated, I'd report it to the Attorney General, the FBI. I'd report it to law enforcement. Absolutely.
While all of that is happening, we're learning more about how the Justice Department is investigating the investigators. The New York Times reporting that Justice will interview senior CIA officers as they take a look at the agency's work on how Russia interfered in our election. For more, we're joined by former CIA officer Jack Rice. Jack, all this talk from the president and the attorney general about investigating the investigators, which comes on top of all the talk about not trusting the intel community on things like Russian interference. What's the impact for people working intel for this nation? And then what's the impact of that on the nation itself?
Well, it can be very frustrating from the perspective of the intelligence community. We have seen this from the beginning of this administration, where recommendations, very specific analysis has been done and provided to the president. And then, for whatever reason, the president decides to go with the North Koreans, decides to go with the Russians, decides to go with a whole slew of other individuals, and to ignore the intelligence community itself. These are professionals who have been working under Republican and Democrat presidents. They don't do this for political reasons. They sacrifice a lot, and to simply have a president deny it because it's, I guess the word would be inconvenient, is something that we find particularly disturbing.
The president has given the attorney general the power to declassify any intelligence material he wants during his investigation. Are you concerned, given his track record, that he would do so for political reasons? And then on top of that, if he does for political reasons, will anybody in the intel community know? Will the public ever find out?
Well, that's one of the big problems. I mean, we have to think about this broader than that. One of the things that we think about in the intelligence community is this. As a recruiter, and that's a word we'll use loosely, as somebody who goes out and finds intelligence into the world, what I used to do was to acquire that information from very specific sources. And those sources had to trust that that information that they were providing to me was something that would be classified, held in a very close manner to make sure that they would be protected. If you have one person without all of the information simply deciding on their own, potentially for political reasons, to declassify that information, the ramifications could be devastating. Let me give you a specific example of that. If you have a situation where there's one unique piece of intelligence that was actually very helpful to the United States, the ability of an opposition organization, intelligence organization, to take that information and then reverse engineer it, you could take it back potentially to the very source itself, even if you don't disclose their name. And those people could then be, dare I say this, murdered along with their entire extended families. Those kinds of things can happen.
Jack, based on what you've seen and read, do you have any doubt that Russia interfered in the election and did it to help Donald Trump?
Absolutely not. In this case, what we have found very specifically is that the Russians absolutely, without question, tried to manipulate this election for their own purposes. And let's be clear about what that means. This isn't really about Donald Trump. This was never about Hillary Clinton. This was about the Russians. And in this particular case, what the Russians decided was that Donald Trump would be better for them than Hillary Clinton would be. And so they backed that horse. From their perspective, they don't care who wins so long as they win. This was never, and I repeat, ever something that was in question. Very clearly on from the beginning, the Russians have been trying to do this, and this is not the first time. They have done this in Georgia. They have done this in Ukraine. They have done this throughout the southern republics. They have done this elsewhere too. This is one of the things that the Russians do.
There are some people wondering if the real point of the Barr investigation of the investigators is really to cast doubt over the conclusion that Russia did interfere. How damaging, how dangerous would that be?
Well, it's huge because what it really does is undercut the credibility of the intelligence community with the American people, too. I mean, we have seen this before, and my real concern is that what Attorney General Barr seems to be doing is he seems to be acting like President Trump's personal lawyer, and his ability to go in and balance out an investigation, not from an actual balance perspective, but from a political perspective to deal with damage control potentially, and a whole slew of other issues. And that's not what his job is to do. And the ramifications for the intelligence community and for the American people goes far beyond the question of this investigation.
Jack, while I've got you, I also want to ask you about two developments in the news. The first is that CENTCOM released video of what it says is an Iranian ship in the Persian Gulf removing a mine from a tanker that had been attacked. And they say that's evidence that Iran did it. Given the administration's clear desire to target Iran and their troubled relationship with the truth, not to mention their questioning of the intel community, do you believe that video? Do you believe that the case that CENTCOM and the administration is making?
Well, my concern when it comes to that is multifolded. The president himself, when he saw the video, at least according to reports, was that it was the Iranians. The problem is that's a decision that has to be determined based upon the intelligence that we have. Are the Iranians upset? Of course they're upset. But let's also contemplate President Trump's national security advisor, Ambassador Bolton, told me directly that there were two options for Iran. This was some years ago, but he told me there were two options for Iran: regime change or bomb them. Those are the words he used with me. So my concern is, if that's his approach to Iran, it seems to me he would be willing to do and say anything for one of those two, and only two options. That brings a very large credibility gap in my mind.
Yeah, and when the public can't trust what the administration is selling, particularly on issues of war and peace, that's real trouble. The other issue is the president's willingness to accept foreign dirt on his opponents. Beyond the politics and the law, is there a national security danger in Trump or anyone else doing so?
Well, I can tell you, again, as a former prosecutor and as a criminal defense attorney, I teach all over the world, and I deal with a lot of issues, including rule of law. The first thing is without question, this is a crime. It is against the law to do that. But in the broader sense, the real problem is this opens up the floodgates for every nation on the planet who wants to manipulate American elections to find out and come into the United States to figure out what they want to figure out so they can go to the president, who apparently wants to listen to them. That's literally the outcome. That's what he is inviting.
Jack Rice is a former CIA agent, and that is only one of the items on his lengthy resume. Jack, thanks for the insight. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Up next, as the Trump administration cracks down on migrants again, a dreamer who's now dedicated her life to helping immigrants will describe how they're being treated and how she's trying to help them.